Spectre and Tenna's TV time.
Well, it's finally here. The video I would have liked to have come out probably like a month ago, but I got wrapped up in school and the previous video and also ironed out every possible thing here because you just have to do that, don't you me? But finally, the project with my blood, sweat, tears, determination and everything else is here. Before we get into what you came for, the bosses, I wanted to give some extra information. First off, I released a poll asking how many bosses you wanted, and while I'm no data analyst, the answer seemed pretty resounding. So I decided to include every boss and mini-boss listed on the Deltarune wiki, along with adding one or two since I thought they also fit the description. This results in a grand total of 31 entries, and technically 36 total boss fights because of the variations of K-Round, Spamton Neo, and Birdly. This is a lot! I haven't slept in weeks! Also, another important thing to mention, I've kind of already made this video. For those of you who don't know, I made a chapters 1 and 2 boss ranking about a year and a half ago, so I was a bit worried that this video would be too rehashy. I asked about this in the same poll, so I think I'm in the clear, but if you have seen the original video, I'll say that while my general placements and opinions are similar, I tried to add a fair bit to the previous ones, and in many cases my rankings actually changed from back then. Basically, I think this video should still be good even if you watch the original, though I won't blame you if you just go to the new ones. Just some quick things to bring up, I've got the placement numbers as chapters in the timeline for this video, however these are without the bosses' names to avoid list spoilers. I'll add a timestamped comment down below which has the bosses' names as well, just in case you don't care about spoiling the list and just want to see where your favourite sploinky doinky placed. Just for fun, I've also made a post with my current top 15 boss battles in Deltarune and Undertale, so check that out if you're interested. Finally, I'm going to be doing little audio clips before each section that kind of plays into the battle itself. I did this in my very first couple of videos, but I cut it off because I thought it was too derivative of other channels, specifically Shayfrillis. I've decided now that imitation is the best form of flattery, and no one's patented this style, and also I just really want to do it. It'll be so fun. For extra measure though, watch Shayfrillis if you haven't after this. I probably wouldn't be making these videos if not for the funny crap man. I think that's about all I have to say. If you disagree with my placements or anything I bring up, please respectfully comment why, or just scream it into a pillow if I really pissed you off. But yeah, Deltarune chapters 1 through 4 boss ranking. You guys have no idea how long I've been waiting for this. I'm so excited. So, without any further ado, don't touch that dial, choose Eternity, and let's get straight into ranking them.
Yeah, that's right, it's me, Waterman.
I fucking hate you.
Okay, before I start this section, I want to make something very clear. I understand why this boss fight has become so loved. I can see why so many people find it funny. The fact that it's at the bottom is not necessarily a reflection of its objective quality, but rather a representation of my experience with it. I'm not calling it the worst boss fight, I'm calling it my least favorite. The following rant is not trying to make anyone like the boss fight less. I just have some animated thoughts that I have an excuse to express in this video. I really do get why you all liked it, I just didn't have the same experience. So without further ado, I kind of hated the water cooler boss fight. Like, hate isn't a word I usually use, but my god, I do not get this. I can see that it's trying to be an unexpected random equals funny moment, but I just did not enjoy it in the slightest. I know I got a lot of flack for saying that aspects of chapter 3 felt shoehorned in the last video, and I agree I was mostly being too harsh, but you can't deny that the water cooler really feels like something they threw in right before the deadline. My biggest negative is definitely the comedic factor. This, in my opinion, is the most forced Toby Fox humor in any of his games. It felt like they were trying to copy what happened with Newbert or Starwalker just so this could be popular, even though I'm sure that's not what happened. I'm sure they were trying to be genuinely funny, but that is well and truly what it seemed like to me. It doesn't tie into the TV world at all and feels like such a sudden and unwanted detour. Also, the gameplay is abysmal. I hear you guys saying that it's a joke boss, so the gameplay doesn't have to be that good. Please, just shush for a second. Other joke bosses like the Mad Dummy or Mike have had pretty great gameplay, and even other small encounters like Mousewheel or Clover didn't have gameplay this annoyingly difficult. And don't get me wrong, I love difficult gameplay, but it didn't work for me here for a number of reasons. First and foremost, it's used to amplify the comedy, and I've already brought up how much I didn't enjoy that. Next, the difficulty is built off of terrible gameplay. This thing has one attack. Sure, it has minor variations throughout, but it's just the same attack. Most normal enemies have at least two. How is that even possible? The attack itself is inoffensive, sure, but it's also unoriginal, and it kind of feels like you should have some interesting gameplay if this is going to be a required encounter. Plus, and I don't even know if this is true, but at least to me, it felt like the hitboxes were really weird. Now, like I said, I don't know whether that's true, but whether it is or it isn't, it's terrible in two different ways. Either the hitboxes were poorly made, or the hitboxes were well made, and the pure nature of the gameplay made it feel like it wasn't. Look, I really don't like this encounter. Once again, if you disagree with everything I've said, that's fine. It'd be great if I were able to get more out of this, but I well and truly detested this encounter, and it's one of the few aspects in Deltarune where I think you could completely get rid of it and the game would be a lot better. So let's just leave the issue be and move on to something a little less divisive.
Nice opinion, but there's just one small problem with it. Who asked? Like, genuinely, who asked?
Whew, now for something which should get me under way less fire. I dare you to find one person who actively enjoys the Clover fight. Literally no one cares about Clover. Honestly, this is just kind of a lame encounter. I was replaying through chapter 1, and instead of using problem solving to figure out what I should talk to them all about, I just kind of did trial and error until I could press spare. If your mini-boss puzzle can be beaten with trial and error in a similar amount of turns to when you actually know what you're supposed to be doing, then it probably isn't a great boss. The gameplay is mid, it's pretty easy to dodge, and once again, they only have the one attack, so that kind of blows. Honestly, I don't even know what I'm talking about. Why am I justifying placing Clover low on a list? You could sail the 7 seas, traverse the lands, learn the power of friendship, and dismantle the intergalactic star society before you find one guy who tells you, actually, I think Clover's kind of cool. Clover is a nothing boss, and the most enjoyment I got out of this encounter was hamming it up to the extreme in the first video I made on ranking these battles. As a wise old plumber once said, let's go.
He's playing 5D checkers over here! What?
Did you know, in the Deltarune wiki, there are technically two different lists for boss and mini-boss enemies. There's the list that's organized by chapter and has complementary images, and a list that's alphabetical. The reason I say that these are two different lists, despite the fact that they classify the same thing and are on the same page, is that C-Round is on the alphabetical list, but not the chronological list. The only reason I could think of something like this happening is that the people who were making this page, when transferring all of the information over from fandom, saw C-Round there, added him to the alphabetical list, but either misread and assumed that it was just K-Round when making the fancier chronological list, or just straight up forgot about him. I hope you found this information interesting, because that's literally all there is to say about C-Round. He really shouldn't count for the purposes of this list, but technically he is on one of the boss lists that I'm using for this video, so here it is. I placed it higher than Clover and the water cooler because those ones had wasted potential, when this does what it sets out to do well. Absolutely nothing.
Wait! They're back!
Oh god damn it, I have to talk about the water cooler again. They did a comedic parody of the joke boss in the chapter directly after the joke boss was introduced, but both chapters were released at the same time. I don't even know what I'm saying right now. This water cooler has infiltrated my mind. I can't think, I can't act, I can only try to decipher why this water cooler has plagued my brethren yet left me to rot in its dungeon of ignorance. Free me from this— Miss Mizzle was a whatever boss. I like the part right before where you inspect the water container, that was pretty clever. Honestly, I don't have the same issue with this one as the actual water cooler, because while it felt like the original was really trying to be funny, I have literally no clue what this one is trying to do. I forgot about it until I found the list of fights I could include, but I wouldn't say it's necessarily bad. Yes, it's just two regular enemy encounters dressed up in a little bit of goofiness and a trench coat, which means the gameplay is meh, but honestly I don't mind the goofiness of the story. It was pretty fun. But anyways, this is just another bland enemy encounter, so down low you go.
Vibe it. Really dig on it. Chew it. Munch, crunch it.
I did not care for the music trio. What? Did not care for the music trio. How can you even say that? Didn't like it. Well, honestly, that's pushing it a bit much. This is another one where I was pretty negative about it in my original video, but it really isn't that bad. It's just a little difficult to classify it as a boss when the whole thing is as scripted as it is. It's just there to introduce S&R actions, and it does pretty well, but there's not a whole lot else to say. I like how the cyber guys have a strong presence throughout the start of the chapter, even if their characterization is pretty bad. I can't tell you a defining trait of any of these guys. Still makes the encounter a fair bit more memorable than something like Miss Mizzle or the water cooler. The main negative for me was definitely the gameplay. It really didn't flow well and the attacks didn't gel together the way I think they were supposed to, but the fight is over in like 4 turns, so I guess the experience could be worse. Ultimately, the main thing that puts this above the previous ones is the amount of character it has. You can't tell me that section at the end where everyone is dancing wasn't the hypest thing ever.
I want a divorce.
I feel about Lenino and Elnina and the Cyber guys very similarly. They're both early game boss fights with subpar gameplay, good characters mostly carried by the story they tell. In my opinion, the gameplay in this one is more annoying than the previous. Most notably is this attack where you have to go around in a spiral. It didn't seem to have a strategy to get past it consistently, and I just kept losing health here to things that made no sense to me, though this could just be a skill issue. With that said, it's going higher than the Cyber guys because of the story and characterization. Lenino and Elnina feel very distinct from each other, and their banter wasn't half bad either. I was thinking, oh no, they're breaking up and such, which definitely made it more memorable than anything else thus far. I also thought it was really funny how Tenna popped in right at the end to just empty out a barrage of I Love TVs. That was funny. Finally, and I didn't consider this much when ranking the boss fight, but I generally really like how prominent these two characters are. It's great to have a recurring plot point that helps tie the chapter together, and all of this bubbling underneath the main story helps keep the boards interesting. But this isn't a character ranking, it's a boss fight ranking, and their boss fight is kinda annoying despite the good elements in my opinion.
Hello, your computer has virus.
Oh god, this is probably going to make some people pretty annoyed. I'm really sorry guys, but I didn't enjoy the ERAM boss fight. And when I say I didn't enjoy it, I mean that it's probably the least fun I've ever had playing this game. I want to preface this by saying that I don't think the fight is low quality. I'll get into this a little bit more, but I think it's very unique and a great change of pace from everything else in the chapter. A lot of the gameplay issues I faced were byproducts of me simply not being very good at this style of gameplay. But my god, this is some of the most infuriating gameplay I've ever faced in my entire life. And I did not find it fun to learn. I just couldn't, guys. This is one of the most demoralizing bosses I've ever played. Every single time I died, every single time I lost health, I wanted to transpose myself into the TV while just so I could slam my fist right through the screen of the game Chris was playing. It isn't like Gerson or the Knight where you feel rejuvenated to defeat the boss after every end screen. No, it was so goddamn annoying every time this thing killed me. I think it's fair to say that I did not enjoy the gameplay here. I wouldn't say that it's bad, it's just so much harder to read in this kind of environment, and a lot of the lessons will happen in large part due to the fact that you literally couldn't see the projectiles coming towards you. I also really didn't enjoy the mechanic of using the sword to kill this thing and its enemies. So often I would lose health simply because I was a smidgen off the same block as these things and they just run into me and oh my god, my blood is boiling just thinking about it. I am a husk of my former self and it is because of a sentient piece of cloth. I don't mind the use of these enemies to drop health, but the RNG involved inherently makes it less fair than the standard system. Also, the fact that it drops more when you've died a few times. It's helpful, but it's also kind of insulting. I don't know, I just feel worse every time I die knowing this, because it feels like the game is literally babying down the fight for me. Overall, my experience first playing this boss is one of my least favorites in all of Deltarune. So why is the battle still this high? Well, two reasons. Number one, the uniqueness, like I mentioned before. You can't deny that this battle has a lot more merit just because of the fact that it takes as different an approach as it does. I cannot imagine that this was easy to put together, but it works really well. When you divorce the gameplay from how the mechanics work, this is a pretty fair system, and the pure intrigue of going up against an enemy in a brand new way was enough to get me invested in the battle. Next, the build-up. This didn't play a large part in the overall placing of the encounter, but the entire Shadow Mantle route before this boss is absolutely phenomenal. I adore how well it sets up the main story of the game, and it's genuinely really disturbing at points. I was super invested in its way of getting across its story in very small fragments, never giving away too much, and there were so many small parts that gave me chills, like when Chris looks away as you kill Susie and Rousey, or the out of bounds feeling when you break through the trees or go out into the open ocean. But yeah, the fact that this is as close as I have to a representation of the Shadow Mantle route on this list gave it some extra points in my eyes. But overall, I never want to play this fight again. Feel free to say I've got a skill issue, I've earned it after a rant of this magnitude, but I well and truly did not enjoy it, despite the fact that I think it's technically pretty impressive.
You parasite!
Mouse Wheel is a weird bloody boss. Like, even by Toby Fox standards weird. It is a spinning ball of mice that follows you around the soul square and shoots out blinding orbs of light. Why does the Mouse Wheel? I don't know. It doesn't know. Who cares? It's Mouse Wheel. This is like the water cooler in the sense that it could probably be removed without losing too much from the chapter, but unlike the water cooler, it's perfectly serviceable. The mice were being built up beforehand, the capture technique, despite being very similar to regular mice, is still a good sparing mechanic. The concept of a mouse wheel fits into the chapter both lore-wise, since it's literally a mouse wheel, but also just by vibes. The fight is still kind of just okay in my opinion though. The gameplay doesn't switch up after the second attack, the humor isn't as strong as it is in other parts of the Pandora Palace in my opinion, and it's just overall another encounter where you wouldn't really consider it a mini-boss without looking at the wiki. I don't know, like I said, it's serviceable, but it's also just kinda mouse wheel. What else is there to say?
Let us in! We must release our spawn!
Okay, we're really stretching the definition of boss here. I mean, I guess that this is a forced encounter against an enemy that you arguably only encounter once, but come on. No one in their right minds finished this thinking, dang, that sure was a mini-boss. This certainly isn't bad or anything, it's a tutorial for the Titan boss fight. I really have nothing to say here, and I don't think anyone cares where I put this thing. This is what you guys get for voting me to put literally every single boss into the ranking. I hope you're happy.
What's going on?
There's so much porn!
Task Manager, the absolute hardest Deltarune boss to get images of for the context of this video. This is probably the main turning point in the list, where from now on the boss fights are all prominently positive, rather than being flawed despite their good elements. I don't think any mini-boss represents that quite like Task Manager. She's good, she has some fun personality, she borrows an awesome theme, her gameplay is good, and the mechanics that she introduces are actually pretty great. Honestly, she feels like another mini-boss that really just emulates the style of a standard enemy, even though she only appears this one time. Most of that's gotta be because she feels like an extension of the two cats. With that said, she definitely has a distinct and memorable design and fits right in with the world of Chapter 2. Like I mentioned before, I really do love her mechanics, namely the attack where she says a letter and you have to go to the corresponding section. It's really unique for Chapter 2, and I kind of wish this got expanded on a little bit more in the battle, but I guess that would have been difficult without the fight dragging on for a little too long. I absolutely love Pandora Palace as a theme, and while this is obviously just borrowed from being in the Queen's Castle, it's still nice to have it in this encounter. Looking past the mechanics, I think that the gameplay is pretty good, but doesn't really stand out. There obviously wasn't much time to flesh out the mechanics, so it was always going to be lower on the list, but it definitely did enough to push itself out of the lower area.
I'm afraid I'm gonna have to expel your kid. He's just a little different. He will not stop running over students.
Let's go! Finally we have a battle against a character I actually care about. Me and Lancer, we're homies. I love how fun he is to be around, he's so charismatic, especially in the first chapter, and he plays off all the other team members really well. He's also just generally really fun with his character design, motivations, and lore elements. If he were real, I'd be playing basketball with him every day. No, not against him, he is the basketball. And it's how much I enjoy his character that made me put the first encounter with him this high. Because outside of that, yeah, I can't deny that this fight is ridiculously easy. One of his attacks is literally just him going in a straight line and nothing else. This easiness is definitely justified, he's literally the first enemy you ever encounter. And it's building up the idea that Lancer is incompetent at hurting anyone, but it still makes the playing experience about as interesting as eating a spade-shaped cracker. But oh well, I still love this guy. Hell yeah, Lancer supremacy. I really enjoy the little bits of text sprinkled throughout the fight, like when it says he isn't riding a motorbike, he just set his bicycle on fire, or whenever he tries to give a one-liner to Chris and Susie, like, I love getting thrashed. No wait, that's you! I don't know, the fight has a bunch of personality, and I love it for that.
2 can play at that game. 3 can play at that game.
Rules card is the best, and you have not seen the last of him. This battle is definitely the weakest of the two, kind of 3 if you count the second instance of K-Round, but it is still really freaking funny. I don't know what to say, he's thine funniest thereth is. His frivolities and incompetence shall not be ignored by thou or I. His battle here, like Lance's, is very, very easy, but I think that's also a little bit of a jab at his incompetence. It at least makes sense in the context of the story. With that said, yeah, it's almost difficult to lose in this fight. You just cut him off as quickly as possible and there you go. The house game is pretty interesting and it could have been cool to see it fleshed out a little more, but it's definitely not the biggest loss in the world. Ultimately, the gameplay is the main thing that puts this above the Lancer battle, since there's at least a bit of strategic thinking and an interesting mechanic. But that's not the main thing I think about when considering this boss, I just think about how goofy Rules is. His Chapter 3 boss fight is included in this list as well, so I might get into it a bit more there, but suffice to say, Rules is a great character, and he makes his otherwise underwhelming boss fight pretty goddamn enjoyable.
Wait, lose the cameras? Don't! Dude, I just threw 2 away.
I'm a little bit surprised to find I placed Shudder this high, because unlike battles like Miss Mizzle and Clover that just feel like regular enemy encounters, this one literally is just a regular enemy encounter. This is the first time you encounter it, but after you get into TV World, it's just another thing to go up against. However, I'm placing it this highly for 2 reasons. Number 1, because of the introduction, and number 2, it is a really good enemy. Starting off with reason number 1, this thing appears when you're almost done with the beach board, thinking you've collected all the images you needed, just standing in this previously inaccessible room. But suddenly, it's revealed that the images you placed form to make a face which looks at you and starts the battle. I just think it's really creative and made me feel surprisingly pumped about the battle. Also, yeah, Shudder is a fantastic enemy. It starts off by giving you some pretty basic attacks, but then literally flips them on their head by taking a screenshot of some bullets and either rotating them or changing their trajectory. It has an extra element of focus to the gameplay, and I really dig figuring out the patterns and managing to casually no-hit some attacks. This is definitely a step up from everything before it gameplay-wise, so I had to give it some extra recognition.
It's okay, I'll get it. No, wait! We'll use the power of friendship.
Susie and Lancer is probably the first real boss fight in this list so far. 13 entries down and we are now reaching the encounters that I consider genuine boss fights. Why did I do this to myself? The Susie and Lancer boss battle fits really well in the story of Chapter 1 and provides some pretty solid characterization. With that said, those things come at the cost of the gameplay. It should be pretty clear in this list, but I honestly find gameplay and story to be pretty equal factors in whether I like a boss or not, with gameplay being only a little higher. In most video games, the actual gameplay would be a fair bit more important, but in games like Undertale or Deltarune, which are not only story-centric, but also have really engaging ones, they kind of coincide with each other. So while I definitely enjoy playing Shudder more, I remember the Susie Lancer battle more fondly just because of how it develops the two. Also, it just has a really strong, fun vibe. The stakes are that if you win, Susie will have to become a good guy, but if you lose, you and Rousey will have to be bad guys. That's so goofy, and for a chapter as innocent as Chapter 1, it's perfect. It's super wholesome to see Susie getting along with Lancer, alongside Rousey working with you to figure out how to defeat them. From a story perspective, this battle is very strong. From a gameplay perspective, yeah, this isn't that great. Susie's axe attack is pretty haphazard and awkward, Lancer's attacks are more boring than most enemy encounters, and overall this fight doesn't offer much gameplay wise that you can't get anywhere else. That's not even to say that it's bad, it's just not very interesting at all. But who cares? This fight is pretty cool. It's got a nice sense of humour with what they do to the thrash machine and the text box during actions. It's got a pretty good story, and the gameplay is at worst uninteresting.
He's playing 6D Connect 4!
K-Round is super forgettable, but not in a bad way or anything. It just gets severely overshadowed by King, who gets severely overshadowed by Jevil, who gets severely overshadowed by Spamton Neo, who just got severely overshadowed by the Knight. It's trapped under several layers of bosses way more interesting than it, and I commend it for that. The gameplay in this one, while still being pretty annoying, is pretty creative and fits in with the boss's design as well. Speaking of the design, when Toby says that he dreamt up Deltarune, this is what I think he was speaking about. Personally, my sleeping and waking hours have been infected with this checkers counter and its way too detailed legs. The story is just kind of funny. I like how it reuses C round. The C stands for Chekhov. I don't know, I really just don't have anything to say about this one, and we still have a lot of entries to get to, so I say we roll on away from this guy.
Hey guys, I found Shadow!
I must avenge Mario.
The statue boss fight is really creepy, and I much appreciate it for that. Toby Fox games use their horror sparingly, but when it appears, it's always a delight, and this is no different. I like the mechanic of quite literally having to blindly trust your memory when it came to stopping the arrows, and thought it was a great extension of the green soul mechanic. It slowly ramps up in difficulty, and the last couple of attacks require a fair bit of focus, so definitely few issues with the gameplay. The only thing that I could say is that it's very gimmicky, so it makes it a bit less fulfilling of an experience than the upcoming ones. In terms of the story or characters, I think that this battle highlights the flaws in Susie's character very well. It's clear that she, at this point in the game, still views things as black and white. You're either good or you're bad, a threat or a friend. But this battle challenges that, not only by putting her trust in an evil and intimidating Gerson, but also damaging his bond with Rousey. It's just as cool as the previous development with not evil and intimidating Gerson, and it definitely adds a new perspective to all of this. Also, the statue is terrifying, especially in that reveal where you get your first good look at it, and it's just the right level away from Gerson. Almost him, but not quite. In fact, the best terror I felt was in the later attacks, where the little soundbite before every attack got higher and higher as the battle progressed. It was terrifying. In terms of the actual story, I think this encounter's fine. It isn't really much of a stuff happens kind of battle, and it does kind of come out of nowhere, but overall, this is a really tense moment in Chapter 4, and it's effective in what I think it tries to do.
That is not correct, because according to the encyclopedia of...
I'm combining all three of the Birdly battles into one place on this list. They'd probably place right next to each other anyways, although each for very different reasons. The very first battle on the main path has by far my favourite visuals, the second has my favourite gameplay by a little bit just because there's more of it, and the Snowgrave route has my favourite story. If I were to rank them from weakest to strongest, it'd probably be Main Path 1, Snowgrave, Main Path 2. But overall, these are all very solid battles that are well scattered throughout Chapter 2. The core gameplay of the Budley battle is surprisingly good and dynamic. The things that he uses to attack you are very distinct from any other enemy in the game, to be honest. Like, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense for this duck, who is good at school in a cyber world, to be attacking you with hurricanes, but for some reason it just fits right in. The actual gameplay itself is pretty interesting too. Each attack has its own pattern to wrap your head around, and a lot of the difficulty comes from predicting the attacks rather than just dodging them. Each of them also looks really satisfying, especially this tornado one around the diamond. The gameplay is a little unforgiving, sure, but all of the encounters are pretty short, so this usually isn't an issue. The only reason that regular path number 2 wins the gameplay competition is that it takes longer and introduces balancing these two enemies, which adds an extra level to wrap your head around. Now onto the factors which differentiate them. First off, normal path number 1 looks gorgeous. The environment just pops due to the color scheme and details on each of this guy's attacks. It sucks that it ends as suddenly and abruptly as it does, because I could just spend the rest of the game in a battle that looks as good as this. Now, as for the Snowgrave story, I don't know if I need to say too much on this front. Everyone talks about how chilling this scene is, pun fully intended, and it perfectly creates an end to the arc of making Noelle stronger in this chapter. Like, there it is. You got what you wanted. Noelle can now kill whatever you want. I hope you're happy. It is really well designed, and while I don't think Budley himself adds much to this encounter, nor does how short it is, it's still a much welcomed addition to the game. Also, I'd like to address the fact that in my last video, I talked about how I didn't find Budley funny at all. I would like to solemnly apologize for my dumb and wrong former self, because this guy is actually really funny. He's the exact epitome of every nerd emoji ever used, and I love how literally no one in the game likes him. Comedy gold.
I thought you were bae. Turns out you're just fam. Bruh.
I kind of figured I wasn't going to include this encounter again, because it is by no definition a boss. It is a cutscene, but it was on the Deltarune wiki, and man is it a good cutscene. It is very difficult to compare to other bosses because there is quite literally no feasible gameplay, but if I were to take a gander of this just at a story lens, it's really effective. This is a great example of why I still really appreciate and enjoy Chapter 1 of this game. It's a small, localized story where the characters each go through solid arcs. It's all pretty generic, I'll admit, but honestly that's part of why I think it works so well. And the Susie battle is a great example of that. I got really tied into seeing Susie go back to her violent and aggressive ways after being betrayed, and was super worried about what she was going to do with Lanza. I really like how this finally teaches her the value of friendship and how the real Deltarune was inside us all along. Yeah, there are a lot of small details in this that just elevate the entire thing, like how Lanza starts shaking halfway through the battle, or those small moments where Susie realizes that he doesn't want to fight her. It's just a really emotional section of the game, and I still enjoy it after multiple playthroughs. But it literally cannot get any higher because the only gameplay you get has no stakes and would be uninteresting anyways.
I'm the real Spider-Man. No, I am the real Spider-Man. Guys, we're all the real Spider-Man.
Okay, now it's time for the Batat battle. Oh yeah, it's time for the Jungler battle. That's great also. Or the battle against this cat thing called Pluey. Wait, this was Pluey? What the hell's going on? That's probably a great summation of the mic battle. What the hell is going on? I was kind of worried about how the humor was going to be at the start, since it did seem kind of haphazard in my opinion, but as the fight unfolded, I liked it more and more. You got Short and Stout Mike first, who so desperately wants you to believe him, then Cat Mike, who is not carrying their weight, and Cowboy Mike, who just works there and is pure chaos, and I think it's great. It turns so quickly into a discussion about who's the real Mike, Mikeception. My absolute favourite part was at the end, where this guy just rants for a solid 2 minutes about how the real Mike doesn't actually exist, and they might be the actual Mikes, but then where does the idea come from in the first place, and it is genuinely hilarious. It was a really clever way to deal with the whole Mike mystery, and it doesn't feel like Toby's poking fun at anyone either. I mean, he himself doesn't know who Mike is. But yeah, real funny stuff by the end of this battle. In terms of the gameplay, this is a weird fight, but in a very good way, I'd say. This battle utilizes the microphone and the mouse as gimmicks. Like, that's kind of insane, especially since they only appear in this one battle. And these gimmicks are turned into mechanics as the battle delves deeper into them, and actually makes most of them pretty satisfying to figure out and balance. I don't particularly think that this is as fun as most regular battles. It does get a little bit janky, and if every battle were like this I'd enjoy it a fair bit less, but since this is just a secret one, I think it was a great idea to go experimental with it, and it definitely could have turned out way worse. Also, Cat Swing is a bop. It's genuinely one of my favourites from Chapter 4, which is funny because it is so radically different from all the other OSTs. But yeah, the mic battle is funny and unique, and I really appreciate it for that. I'm grouping Rules Card Chapter 3 and Spamton together because they are both this high for the exact same reason. They're bloody hilarious, uproarious, downright side-splitting, and I can't for the life of me figure out which I like more. If we get the gameplay and stuff out of the way, I'd say that both of them have just okay gameplay, which is fine because it isn't the focus of either battle. Both themes are pretty good, but Spamton gets extra points for having an original one which really matches his energy, and both of them have really funny mechanics, Spamton's being the deal, and Rules' being that goddamn laser pointer. So in terms of the main draw, the funnies, these battles are surprisingly different. The Rules battle has a small amount of incredibly funny jokes, meanwhile Spamton just lets loose a stream of insanity, with some landing very well, like, "Deal so low, everyone I know is dead," or just, "Help," or when he says no whenever you don't want to take the deal at the end. But really, we all know why Spamton is as funny as he is. It's the vibe of manic energy that just emanates from the absolute get-go. You don't know whether to laugh at him, be worried, run away. He's like the uncanny valley of humor, and I can't believe that that is a valid sentence I can say in this situation. Meanwhile, Rules has pretty easy to mark off sections in this battle, and they're all really damn hilarious. I appreciate how this fight starts off in the idea that if Rules tries to fight you guys, he's going to lose so hard, and this idea is molded into some really funny ways. Like at the start, how you can only act, so for Rules' action, he decides to bring in some guys with shotguns. Or when he tries to help Lanino and Elnina, so decides to bring out the coveted laser pointer. The laser pointer thing is actually the funniest joke in all of Deltarune in my opinion. I could not stop laughing when I first saw it. I just really like characters who are so oblivious to the fact that everyone finds them annoying, and Rules has got that down to a T. So yeah, these fights both have a lot of merit in my eyes for the exact same reasons. Which one I like more depends on the day you ask me pretty much, but as of writing this, I give the lead to Rules, just because the fight is unexpectedly funny, while you know Spamton is good from the get-go. So I have it the laser pointer.
Grandpa! You can't be saying that, Grandpa! What? All I said was...
Okay, so from here on the list, we've got the good stuff. These are your Shadow Crystal bosses, your final bosses, all of that. But one has got to be at the bottom, and honestly, I don't know if I'm going to make it through putting this guy this low. I want to reiterate something I've already said. I don't think this boss is bad. I don't think it's objectively worse than any of the bosses above. I'm just placing him this low because of my personal experience with him. Even saying that, I know it's not going to be enough to stop the pitchforks and Molotov cocktails, because at 10th we have Gerson. I understand why you guys like this fight, really I do. I just had some issues with it that pushed it down lower than the others. First off, I do want to highlight what it does well. I really like the visuals. The room with the detailed window behind you is really iconic and visually appealing, and a lot of effort was put into making the attack smooth and well coloured. The theme, Hammer of Justice, is also fantastic. It's got a great vibe and flow to it, and I like the sounds used in it, with the flute type thing and the natural sounds which you'll get all throughout Chapter 4. I also, like everyone else, dig the vibe of this fight. It's a lot more empowering than other Shadow Crystal fights, and the fact that Gerson is providing some sage words of wisdom while he tests Susie's strength is really unique, and I like it a lot. I like how he talks to her as an equal and takes in what she has to say. This is impactful in a very different way to all of the other secret bosses, and I respect the hell out of it. So why is this fight down so low? Well, two reasons, and they both relate to the gameplay. First off, Red Soul. When you're in the Red Soul form, Gerson has two attacks. One of them involves throwing axes, and one of them involves slamming down his mighty hammer, and also the one with the shell, but let's just ignore that one for now. The issue with this is that the hitboxes are so strange. I don't know if anyone else found similar issues, but I was phasing through his axes practically every time I passed this attack. I still right now have no idea where the axe can actually damage you, because it feels like unless you hit it dead center, you're fine. Same thing with the hammer attack, you can sit comfortably inside this warning rectangle because so often the way that he slams it down affects how you get hit. Now, these aren't the worst things in the world. The axe attack, or the axe tack, is hard enough as is, and the hammer is usually pretty readable, but it made some moments feel confusing when they really shouldn't have been. They don't need to perfectly fill the object, it just needs to be clear what hurts and what doesn't. Next, the Green Soul. Now, I'm a fan of the Green Soul in Undertale. I've beaten Undyne the Undying at least 5 or 6 times. While practicing this, I've learned to just press up when I see an up arrow rather than holding it down. However, I had to completely unlearn this mechanic in the Gerson fight, because if the arrows come diagonal and you don't let go of both arrow keys at the exact same time, then the shield unceremoniously goes to the side and the arrow hits you. I lost so much health in most of my attempts because of this, and every time it did, it felt more like the game's fault than mine. Now, this is definitely a case of a skill issue, and it's significantly improved now, but that doesn't change the fact that it wasn't fun to lose to either of those things, a sharp contrast to something like Jevil or the Knight, where I knew how to improve. So yeah, I think a lot of difficulty in this fight comes unfairly, but if you disagree, then that's perfectly valid. I just had a bad time with this guy, even if I think a lot of it was done pretty well.
Wow, look!
I'm a computer.
I was pretty critical of the Queen battle in my original video on this topic, and I would once again like to apologize for a younger and weirder version of me, because the Queen fight really slaps. Also, Queen is one of the only boss enemies in the top 10 without a real gimmick to her name. Sure, there's the shield, but that's really just more of an extension to gaining mercy. This is interesting because my main positive for this battle is the gameplay. Her attacks all just feel like regular enemy attacks. The thing is, these are fantastic regular enemy attacks. They tie into the Cyberworld theme super well, and they have such a perfect amount of difficulty for this point in the game. They're also really fun to dodge. All the movement feels natural, and it's easy to understand where the danger zones are. This is one of my favorites to replay, and I can't overstate how well it does in this aspect. But who cares about things like gameplay and something like a boss fight? Let's go on to the characters. Queen is probably tied with Spamton for being my favorite character in Chapter 2. She is absolutely hilarious, such a simple yet absurd character. I love how she never uses any commas or full stops, it just adds so much to the humour. And I'll be frank, I think these aspects of her aren't utilised enough. While I can understand the lack of humour in this final battle, I do kind of wish there was a bit more since it's such a staple of her character. In the opening cutscene, they do a pretty great job at making her feel like the same character, while being very threatening, subordinating Berdly and having a true chokehold over the gang, but then she goes into a monologue about how she's a computer in the real world and this is her motivation, and okay, you've kind of lost me. It just isn't all too compelling in my eyes, and I've mentioned how I have similar problems with most enemies in this kind of mindset. It just lowers the stakes a little and makes the villain feel more silly. But I guess that's okay, since she's already so silly in the chapter, she almost unleashed gods of darkness and incomprehension. Generally, this is just a very well made and well designed boss fight, even if I have some issues with the characterization.
It goes really well with my giant robot.
Wait, what?
Giga Queen is essentially the same as Queen, except they let it be funny. Not much more to say. Okay, maybe there's a bit more to say. The Giga Queen fight has its own mechanic, like many Deltarune battles, but unlike many Deltarune battles, I think that this mechanic is just as fun, if not more so, than average gameplay. It's surprisingly satisfying getting a bunch of hits on Queen in quick succession, only dodging out of the way as she goes on the attack. It's usually clear to see which way she's attacking and when you should get hit, with only a blip in quality there every now and again. But yeah, this loop gets expanded on in some interesting ways, but the core idea is so strong that it's great to just vibe alongside it. This is even better because of the length of the fight. This is one of the longest in the entire game, and while I got pretty annoyed because I died on her last goddamn attack, it's definitely a net positive with this style of gameplay. This is overall one of the most enjoyable battles in the game. It's pretty easy, but it has its difficulty spread out across the fight, and is clearly borrowing from some great games. I also think that the visuals in this fight are sick as all hell. We got the city flying past in the background, we got the Giga Queen and the Thrash Machine, it's like poetry, it rhymes. It's really visually appealing and adds an extra layer of fun to the battle as a whole. Then we have the story. I think it's really fun and engaging. It takes a very different approach to most other chapters, but it does what it sets out to do really well. The intro sequence with Giga Queen really raised the stakes in a perfectly goofy way, and speaking of goofy, that boot up sequence with all the recruits you gained along the way. I must be spelling some gorgonzola because that is cheesy as all hell. Same thing with Queen's lines, she's super funny in this battle. I love how she attempts to manipulate the group before immediately giving up and just kind of asking them to join her while beating them up. It's just generally a great feeling, and it's funny the whole way through. In fact, the main reason it isn't higher is just that it's not as impactful as the upcoming ones. It goes for a more laid back and funny final boss battle, and while that is by no means a bad thing, I definitely prefer the fights that feel more climactic or intimidating, because they do it really well. But this is a very fun, highly worthwhile boss fight.
Why is this process taking so long?
That's right, gamers, I put Jackenstein above Gus, and y'all can't make me do anything. This is my list, I choose where everything goes, and if I want the silly pumpkin man who gives you a tutu to go over Gerson, I'm gonna do it. I have free will, we're all individuals! Yeah, I don't know, Jackenstein is just overall a really fun fight. The gameplay slaps, the humor is solid, the theme is great, and it has a very interesting mechanic. Obviously, the best thing to come out of this boss fight is I swear to God, when I realized the soul was extended like Azrael in the Undertale pacifist route, I just knew that people like me were going to cling onto it. I like seeing how the battle actually used this not just as humour, but also to make the battle more engaging. It made it so even when I had unlocked the exit, I was still on my toes looking for anything wrong. The gameplay is also so cool. It uses a single screen concept really well, allowing for a lot of interesting attacks, great background details, and a more fulfilling experience. That fulfillment also comes from the fact that this fight is very which is also good because you get more of this great gameplay. And the theme is really funky, and the spooky scary theming fits surprisingly well into the chapter, and what the actual hell, they did not need to go this hard with this battle. This is literally a random detour battle to introduce mechanic and let Toby vent for a second, but it's seriously well designed. I obviously do have some issues with it. It can be a little slow at points because of how large the screens are. Also, because you have to get as much TP as possible, I found myself really hesitant to use any heals, and you can use a lot of health in a single attack, which led to a fair few stressful deaths. And this isn't really a negative, but the upcoming battles just have more of a story impact, which gives them the upper hand. But at the end of the day, this is definitely one of my favourite battles because it had no right to be as good as it is, yet lo and behold.
You know what? Be afraid!
Okay, if you had have told me 6 weeks ago that we'd not only encounter the Knight, but also go into a full-on battle with a Titan, I would have lost my marbles, gone through the 5 stages of grief, moved to Peru, started a new life, assassinated my... But yet, here we are in the future, and everything is just insane. I'm still not quite over the fact that we encountered a Titan. In Chapter 4, like, half the reason the fight is this high is just because we got to encounter a Titan. A Titan! The main reason that this battle sticks out to me is the fact that despite the behemoth of an enemy you're up against, it still keeps the vibe of Chapter 4. Chapter 4 is a very otherworldly and quiet chapter, so when you get to this final boss fight, instead of creating a big booming climax, it puts you up against a creature of angelic magnitude and translates the ambience from before into horrified wonder. I love the Guardian theme so much. It really captures that curiosity and terror when you realize that you have to face something which literally everyone believed would be the final boss of the whole game. It's more unique than any gameplay mechanic could be. Also, I do really appreciate the move to make this an enemy now. Even if Titans are used in future chapters, I really hope they are, it's clear that this game doesn't want you to think that the main threat is these godlike enemies. Rather, it wants the threat to come from more personal conflicts, danger where you have a connection to what's attacking you. Stuff like Chris and the Soul, the Mystery Man, or whatever's going to happen with Noelle and the Snowgrave route. It unexpectedly left me more excited for what's coming next, but that's all surrounding the boss fight. What about the actual fight itself? I think it's really good. My only issue is that I kind of wish we got to see more raw power from its attacks, like this laser one rather than just using its minions. It just has more aura. Also, I remember finding some of the gameplay kind of awkward on first playthrough, but no, it's actually pretty great. I find it very interesting to try not to move too much so you don't ram into spawn, but also having to dodge these worms or these red guys. I would have liked more variety because there's only 4 real attacks, but I don't care too much since they get built upon very well. I also want to touch on the visuals because oh god, oh man, they are spectacular. Well, I'll be frank, the only part that kind of messes me up is how different the Titan's wings are from its head stylistically. Like, this one is so incredibly flowy and this one is so incredibly stagnant. But everything else is awesome. The environment, the attacks, the crumbling tower beforehand, it's all amazing. They pulled out all of the stops for this fight visually, and I really appreciate it. The final thing I'll bring up is the story inside the battle. You know, where the Titan regenerates, but then Gerson shows up and all of that. I'll be honest, while it was hype as all hell, it still does kind of feel like the game needed an excuse to be able to kill a Titan and so pulled out this trump card. I'm not saying I didn't like his inclusion, I just think that for a story so unique and atmospheric, it ends with a character swooping in to save the day after a fake out death like it's a Minecraft movie. It got really cheesy at the end, and while that's still pretty epic, I definitely prefer the vibe of it before this point. Overall, this is a really well made fight, and it was unexpected in a million different ways.
Then I guess I'm evil. Hit it, boys. 2, 3. I'm evil and I love it.
I am the #1 King Glazer of all time.
Yes, beating Giga Queen, Regular Queen, Gerson, and the Titan is king. I understand why you guys don't like him, I truly do. I get why you guys say that he's not a great character, why the gameplay is just okay, and why this isn't as interesting as the final bosses in future chapters. I understand why you say that, but I literally could not disagree more. In my eyes, this is the point in the list where I go from thinking the bosses are great to absolutely adoring them. We're talking a spontaneous 5-minute rant if you name any of the top 5 bosses to me in real life. The best way I could describe it is that it's generic in the best way possible. Chapter 1 as a whole is a very basic chapter. It's about only a few characters, there aren't any wild mechanics, and the story as a whole is pretty cookie cutter. However, that's what I like so much about it. It feels like a fairy tale and it sets a great base of knowledge and excitement for everything else to come in the series. And the king battle at the end, in my eyes, is a great topper to all of this. I like how King is so obviously an evil villain. Lancer speaks about him so quietly, he lives in a castle, he wears a cape. May as well finish the design by giving him a twirly mustache and a maniacal laugh. Wait, he has one of those too! He's such a delightfully evil villain that gives you a clear and dangerous threat. By the time you get to him, it's clear that you've encountered the final battle, thanks to the intense scene beforehand and Chaos King, one of my favourite tracks in Chapter 1. Speaking of that beforehand scene, I think the story surrounding this battle is perfect. It gives Susie a chance to be a true good guy, it gives you something to actually worry about, and makes King a truly heinous villain when he threatens to throw his son off a cliff. Lancer, my guy, I will adopt you! Of course he wouldn't actually die, but it's clear that he has no problem using people around him as pawns. Wait a second! And the scene after where he catches the heroes off guard just solidifies how he doesn't play by the rules if it gets him what he wants. And he gets genuinely close to murdering Chris in this super intense scene. And he says, "Quiet people piss me off," which is what Susie said at the start, and she realizes how she was being a bad person, but decides then that she's going to be a hero, and I'm going to die of asphyxiation before I'm done loving this battle. I also think that the gameplay is great. It doesn't go completely off the walls like other chapters, but it still adds enough variety to be interesting. I really like all of the attacks where he moves the battle box around, except this one is kind of annoying, but the gameplay is generally very solid and fun with no underlying issues. The main reason that this isn't higher is that I can't feasibly place it above battles that are more interesting or creative, you know, by having a secret route to it or having new mechanics or just being given the context of a wild backstory. I can't deny that King is pretty generic in this regard. With that said, I love this battle so much, and I will stand alone as the sole member of the King fan club.
Great, now none of us can watch TV. That's my TV!
What the actual fuck? Why is the Tenna fight so good? Like, genuinely, what the How the is it this I did not think I was going to get much out of this fight at all. I have a lot of issues with Chapter 3, and a lot of them are somewhat connected to Tenna. I think that he has a kind of silly motivation, so whenever he tries to be serious, it never feels all that impactful to me. So surely I wouldn't love a final battle. Surely the boss fight against him wouldn't be one of my favorites in the entire game. Guess what it is? The Tenna boss fight has such a distinct feeling to it that I almost can't put it into words. It gives Tenna a really interesting dilemma and motivation, while also having all of the excitement and energy that could come from having a TV show host as an antagonist. I want to touch on that thing I said about exciting, because, my god, my favorite aspect of the fight has got to be the adrenaline rush you get playing it. The OST, its TV time sounds a whole lot like those banger Mario Kart tracks, but it still has the melodies that Toby is known for. The visuals absolutely pop out of the screen with bright colors and a sick stage environment. The gameplay, yeah, let's get into the gameplay. While the main board attacks are good but kind of annoying, especially this DVD logo star one, that's not where most of the gameplay comes from. Most of the gameplay that you're going to remember comes from the mini games you play, and these are seriously so well made. All of them have easy to understand concepts, and they really spice up the experience. The transitions make it feel like you're zipping all around the world you've been in, and it's just as enjoyable as it is exciting. It's maybe my favorite mechanic in the game so far, and while I haven't heard of WarioWare before this chapter, it seems that Toby did a great job emulating that feel. Now, I said before that I was worried about the story not being too effective for me, but it really works in this battle. They don't try to make it that melodramatic or emotional, it just works as a surprisingly sympathetic reason for this guy to be going up against you. He gets across what he wants really well, while also having a bit of that manic energy that comes from the fear that people will leave you. Also, they don't make many references to the fact that he's an inanimate object in the real world, so no issues. Before I finish this segment, I have to bring up this part right at the end, where you flick between the minigames every couple of seconds, barely having a chance to keep up. Then you get into this one-on-one brawl with Tenna, and just as you fully defeat him, he just stands there in the middle as you get transported through all the TV world in a complete breakdown. It is genuinely the coolest ending that this fight could have possibly had, and very few gaming experiences have this much energy to them. The only negative things I could say about this fight is maybe that the regular attacks are kind of annoying, some of the minigames seem less fairer than others like this shooting one at the end, and the fact that I'm not as invested in this one as I am the absolutely amazing upcoming battles. But I could not be happier with how this battle turned out, and I did not expect it to go nearly as hard as it did.
Don't forget, I'll hit you with my car.
Before I get into this segment, I want to clear something up because it seems I worded something horribly wrong in my Deltarune review. I think that the knight being introduced here was a great choice and definitely a well thought out decision. I like a fair bit of its execution too. I just think that in the main route, it has poor pacing and it could have benefited from some clues that the knight was kicking around somewhere in this world before it made its entrance. In my perfect world, you'd simply encounter the knight but not battle it in a normal playthrough, and the battle against it would only be unlocked once you have the Shadow Mantle. Alongside this, my only criticisms for the boss fight is that this attack can feel pretty awkward despite looking very good. This one is surprisingly easier than all the others, and the knight as a character obviously isn't as interesting as any other Shadow Crystal enemy, at least for now. Also, Black Knife is fine, but it doesn't hold a candle to most other boss fight themes. I just thought I should clear that up, because when you look at the knight as a secret boss, it is absolutely jaw-droppingly insane. It is the most intense, difficult, and mind-blowing boss fight in this entire game. I can't deny that the shock I felt when Tenna got completely and utterly one-shotted was not something that I'd felt for a long time, and that quintupled when I saw the text, "The Roaring Knight appeared." Oh my god, how incredibly earth-shattering 4 words can be. But you can see all of that on a normal playthrough. How does it function as something you have to beat? I prefer it probably about 10 times as much. The gameplay in this battle is some of my favourite in the entire game. It requires so much focus. You have to take this battle as seriously as the heroes if you want to win it. This attack in particular, the box cutter, is insanely difficult for me to this day, but it's still incredibly fun because of how cleverly and concisely it demonstrates what you need to do. This sentiment can be shared across pretty much all of its attacks, with a lot of them also feeling absolutely awesome to pull off, specifically this knife attack. So the gameplay is fun, but the other main thing it does is make you fear the knight. This is what I was talking about in the Titan battle. Not only is it incredibly difficult, like any good knight fight should be, or to shorten, knight should be, but it also visually represents the power that the knight has. Like the knife tunnel attack when it fills up most of the screen and its attacks blur past, the box cutter where it tears apart the arena relentlessly, this mini final attack where it lets out a barrage of slashes, and it all culminates in one of the greatest special attacks of all time, where it sucks in all of this energy, forcing you to wrap around and around its form, the tension growing, the pitch heightening, then a blip of silence before it lets out an earth-splitting roar and releases all of this energy in a blood-pumping, mind-warping burst of power. Like, that's so cool, I literally don't have the words to describe it. It manages to keep this sense of power in the scenes right before and after too. The incredible sound design in this opening scene makes a fantastic first impression and builds the tension super well, and when you defeat it, it literally knights Chris. Like, you haven't beaten it, you've just earned its respect. That is such a cold power move. One last thing I'd like to mention is how empowering this fight is. The Mystery Man speaks directly to you and says that what you're trying to do is an impossible task, and yet I always felt fueled to try again after this. In fact, one time I actually died on its final attack, but rather than giving up, I read the Mystery Man's message and it was uplifting? He said that he felt it. That was the one, you're right there. Like holy crap, I've never felt better about getting so far in my life, and in my next attempt, I defeated it. It's such a small decision, and yet it impacted how I felt about the fight immensely. Overall, the knight battle is incredibly impressive. It's so intense, blood pumping, and fills me with determination. It has fantastic gameplay, and despite its flaws, it's earned its spot here.
Let me introduce you to the new Joker!
I don't want to make this segment overtly long because unlike almost every other Chapter 1 and 2 boss, my thoughts are pretty much exactly the same on this guy from the first video on this topic. If you remember how much I loved him then you'll know how amazing that truly is. In order to simplify the scripting process, I'm just going to play clips from that video to summarize my feelings.
Let's be honest.
Okay, never mind, back to regular scripting. Jevil is absolutely remarkable. It's one of the best boss fights in the game because it prioritizes gameplay above all else. The core gameplay in this fight is, in my opinion, the absolute best that Toby has ever made, and it's really not that close. Every single attack has an easy to understand yet hard to master pattern that ties in really well with this idea of overwhelming chaos, and even after beating him 20 times, trying to no-hit him is really difficult and requires a lot of focus. The visuals are also great. When comparing it to the standard of Chapter 1, it's super high quality, with my favourite details being the way the carousel wraps around this box, this iconic environment, and the way that Jevil's dancing gets more and more frenzied as the fight goes on. But the most slept on aspect is how cool this guy is to unlock. Like, I'm not in Crazy Town, right? It gives casual players a reason to explore this world and find out the secrets around it, making deals with hidden criminals, speaking to mysterious shopkeepers, going down hidden paths, and all of this searching, tension building culminates in an off-the-walls, absolutely insane hidden boss fight. Like, that is so insanely cool and it's done perfectly here. and he has a great interpretation of freedom, and his battle theme is one of the best in the game. Like, it just does everything perfectly. I don't know where he ranks on other lists, but due to the fact that he's kind of been forgotten in the story, he still feels criminally underrated to me. The only new criticism I have is that Jevil's character isn't really my favourite. A lot of his dialogue is a little wonky, and his personality is just a one-dimensional chaos enthusiast, which is definitely good, but it leaves a fair bit to be desired. But that's it, not an issue with the boss fight. The actual battle itself is fun, intense, difficult, and one of my favourite parts of the entire game. Now, if you've seen my previous video on this, which you really don't have to, it sounds like I ingested 8 cans of helium and a cheese grater sideways, you might be wondering what tops my previous favourite battle in the game. And if you've been keeping track on what we haven't gotten to yet, you might be a little confused. But either way, let's jump right on into the number 1 spot. So, numero uno. I've done a lot of praising throughout this video. The past 30 minutes have pretty much just been good boss fight after great boss fight after amazing boss fight. So something that beats all of them would have to be amazing, something near perfect, something that manages to do what others simply can't. And I'm happy to say that I've found this battle. This battle, of course, is both versions of Spamton Neo. When I replayed this guy for the purposes of this video, it just kind of clicked with me. Spamton Neo's boss fight is kind of unreal. Not because of any singular aspect, even though all of these are excellent in their own ways. Every attack is fair and they're all wonderfully varied. The mechanic is well designed and gets a lot of good use. The theme is incredible and one of the best tracks in the game, and it adds tons of interesting layers to Spamton as a character. But that's not the main reason it's so great. This boss fight has a vibe that no others do. It's a mix between intense terror and intimidation, but also thrill and excitement, a kind of mix that I didn't even think was possible. The entire battle is just coated in this manic and desperate energy that fuels so much lore, yes, but also genuinely effective humor and wackiness. I have to reiterate, despite how much I loved it in my initial ranking, I severely undervalued Spamton Neo before. The part where this feeling is most obvious is in the opening scene, which is also where Spamton starts talking about freedom. Oh my god, this interpretation of it has got to be the simplest of all the Shadow Mantle battles so far, but it is by a mile the best executed. Watching Spamton think he's gained his freedom before yelling about his still remaining strings is super disturbing and still fits his character exceptionally well. Then when he turns to Chris, says that they're going to break their chains and look straight into heaven, oh my god. This invoked such a physical reaction in me on first playthrough, and it's one of my favourite scenes in the entire game. The entire battle after this point is solely focused on balancing that feeling of dread alongside the inherent humour in going up against a god like Spamton. There are so many attacks that fit this so well, like this one where he bends over backwards as his heart reaches out to spew bullets at you, all the ones with mini Spamton heads flying towards you, or the world-renowned Pippus. Throughout its entirety, the battle is using the idea of Spamton Neo in really goofy and creative ways, while also keeping a genuinely disturbing undertone as this suddenly hyper-powerful being makes up attacks and strategies randomly and without thought. So yeah, this fight is incredible, but the main reason it's up here, the factor that made me completely certain I liked it more than Jevil, the Knight, and every single other fight I've spoken about, the Snowgrave version. It has all of the amazing elements, minus the intro scene, but with an ungodly well done ending. It is terrifying watching Spamton of all people relish in your defeat as you're faced with the impossible task of defeating him now that he's pretty much a total god. His true colours finally shine with paralysing lines like "Scream into the receiver, no one will ever pick up." It is so tense, with this dark and foreboding music filling the background, Spamton laughing as you call for your friends, seemingly stuck at an impasse against something much, much stronger than you. But then, you whisper her name. Time practically stops, as Spamton has a more visceral reaction, fully aware of how you're using her, only for Noelle to swoop in. Peak. What an expertly done scene, man. It is terrifying. It shows Spamton Neo in all of his glory, allows him to show his true colours, yet also serves as a perfect way of demonstrating exactly why the Snowgrave route is as horrific as it is. Finding out how much I adore this battle has been amazing. The only feasible criticisms I could even mention is that the Pippus attack is kind of frustrating, and this secret lever to access the room is kind of BS. But even though I've been speaking about this fight for a solid 3 or 4 minutes, I don't feel like I've gotten out everything I've wanted to say. I haven't even gotten into the fan animations. Like, the things I've got up on screen are probably part of the reason it is at the #1 spot. It promotes so much creativity, and it's so cool to see people take this and make something new out of it. But overall, this battle is amazing. It's got everything. Gameplay, story, mechanics, music, 3 times the firepower, 2 times the water power, and flying heads. If Toby can cook up something this engaging and exciting for a one-chapter enemy, I can't wait for what's coming next. So, there you go. Every Deltarune boss ranked so far. This is maybe the biggest video I've ever done on this channel, so if you enjoyed, that's great to hear. Last time I did one of these videos, I spoke about how I didn't think that Deltarune was going to be better than Undertale for me, due to A, the amount that I adore Undertale, and B, my issues with Deltarune at that point. However, nowadays I can see Undertale's flaws a little more, and the 2 most recent chapters have got me much more invested in the story, so honestly, I reckon this game can genuinely top it for me. If you had have told me 2 years ago that I'm saying that now, I would have assumed that you were lying, but honestly, I'm really glad that I get to be saying this. I have my issues with Chapter 3, but it sets up the night really well, and it's very distinct from any other chapter, and Chapter 4 blew me away, but in a subtle way, like a puff of smoke being blown away in the wind. I suppose we'll just have to wait until Chapter 5, where we get to see Asgore run over a death-shaped pothole if Toby isn't a coward. But well and truly, from the bottom of my heart, thanks for watching this video. Please do consider dropping a like and a sub if you feel like it, it'd help out a lot. Hopefully you agreed with some rankings, but if you disagreed with any, cough cough, I'm going to be verbally blasted with a nuke for Gerson and I'm aware, cough cough, feel free to offer your thoughts in the comments below. This took a really long time to make, and while I enjoyed pretty much every step of it, I want to go to bed now. So once again, thanks for watching, enjoy them boss fights, and cue the outro music.